Welcome to Visual Coding for Beginners. I'm going to show you how to write code in an online environment. So there's no need to download anything. There's no need to install anything. You don't need to make any changes to your computer. All you need to do is Google p5.js or go to p5.js.org. It'll take you to this website. Down here on the left, you'll see various different things that you can explore, including examples, places where you can learn about how to create sketches. But we're going to jump straight into the editor, which you can find up here. There's a link for, or down here. Or you can go straight to editor.p5js.org. Straight away, you'll notice a couple of things. There's a little bit of code on the left, and then there's a big blank space on the right. I'm going to change the settings a bit so we can see this slightly more clearly. The preview is previewing a web page. What p5.js does is it allows us to use JavaScript along with some additional commands and keywords that p5 has added onto the top to quickly and easily create sketches, so images or animations that will appear as a web page. In order to do that, the code does two key things. The setup is run once and once only when we press play. And then the draw loop is run repeatedly. About 50 times a second, the draw loop will be rerun. So this code is constantly being run. It doesn't look like much is happening, but that's because all we're asking it to do is fill the background with a pale gray. That's 220 is a level of brightness between 0, which will be black, and 255, which is completely white. So 220 at a pale gray is going to show us where our canvas is, 400 pixels wide and 400 pixels high. In order to appreciate that this is changing, we're going to need some kind of element that can move or appear differently as time goes by. So inside the draw loop, if I press enter in here, you'll notice that the code I'm going to write is still between these two curly braces. I'm going to ask for a circle. I could start by putting the circle 200 pixels to the right of the far left of my canvas, 300 pixels down from the top, maybe give it a diameter of 100 pixels. And then when we press play, it appears down here. So far, so good. What if we change the 200 to mouse X? Lowercase mouse followed by a capital X. This gives us the X coordinate of the mouse on the screen. So as long as I'm over the canvas itself, the circle is going to remain anchored, if you like, to the position of the mouse, at least the X coordinate of the mouse. You can probably guess we could make the circle track the mouse more precisely by giving an X and a Y, and now it's forced to be in exactly the same position. You can make things a little weirder by changing things around. If we've got negatives, we're going to have some strange results, but we can use height minus mouse Y, where height automatically keeps track of how tall the canvas is. And now we've got a kind of reflection thing going on. Depending on where you put your mouse pointer, the circle will correspond to that, but not be exactly the same. So you can see there's all sorts of different potential things you can play around with, even with a single line of code. But once you've made something interesting, you're going to want to share it with somebody. And if you go up to File, Save, you'll notice you can't save unless you have signed up. So you can sign up by clicking this, or you can go up to the top right where there's a sign up button. You don't need to pay anything for this. You can log in with Google if you like. And once you've done that, you should have something that looks a bit like this. Pretty much exactly the same, but it'll now know who you are. And if you want to give a more descriptive name, you can do that up in here. Make sure you save your canvas. And once you've done that, and you've got an account, there'll be quite a few more options in the file menu. So for instance, if I want my circle to have an X coordinate that corresponds to my Y coordinate and a Y coordinate that corresponds to my X coordinate, I can do something like this. Now we've got very confusing behavior. Now I want to share my sketch. I can go up to File. I'm going to save it again because I've made some changes. And then I'm going to go to Share. There are a few options in here. The bottom one, Edit, will take you to exactly the same link that you can already see in the address bar at the top. That will allow anyone else who goes to this site to see your code and to duplicate it to use for themselves if they like, make some changes, play around with it. If you use this one, that will take them directly to the canvas itself that we were seeing a preview of. So they won't automatically see the code behind it, but they will be able to play with the sketch that you've made. So you could send this link to a student or somebody who was learning the same kind of thing as you, and they could play with it and interact with the web app that you've created or whatever it is that you've done without necessarily seeing the code behind it. And if then you wanted to see the code, it's always possible. So the thing to know about what you've created by signing up is that there is now a depository for your sketches. If I go to open, then I've got a whole list of any sketches that I've made in the past. You can search through them. This is why it's helpful to give them sensible names. Go back to them, play with them, but remember, anybody else is able to access exactly the same thing that you've made. So they can go and they can see your code. They can't change what's saved in your area, but they can take it, duplicate it, build on it themselves. So it's not private or secure, but it is easy to share and easy to access for yourself once you're saved. I would encourage you to also use the examples section down here. File examples will take you to a bunch of carefully curated sketches that the creators of P5 have put together. So if, for instance, you are interested in how the mouse works, you could go down here and find some examples of sketches that have been put together. Typically, they're not very many lines long, so you can read through them, try to work out what's going on. Oh, I wonder what this does, etc., etc. And then when you run the sketch, you can investigate, see what changes, see what happens when you're holding down the mouse button as opposed to when you're not, and see if you can work out what changes in the code and why. This is a good way to start getting a feel for what works, but I would encourage you just to have a play around. Try changing some code that someone else has written. Try writing some code for yourself. And remember, if you go back to the main p5.js website, the reference section on the left here is a really good place to look if you want to find out how to draw, for instance, a rectangle, or what other shapes are available to be created. How do you make a line? They'll show you little examples of a line. They'll explain how you can make different thicknesses of line. And down here, you'll see the various parameters involved. You need the X and Y coordinates of the start of the line, X and Y coordinates of the end, and it'll draw you a line segment on the screen. So do have a play around, see what you can come up with on your own, and happy coding.